Hello, beautiful people. Welcome and thanks for joining today in the Zoom room. I want to start by acknowledging that Ted Witzel will be joining us as soon as a strange alarm in his building allows him to do so. But I just want to say a couple words off the top anyway, in terms of context, and of course, thank you all for being here. I want to start us off first in a good way, with an acknowledgement of the land that I'm joining from today, and where SummerWorks is also headquartered, which is Toronto, and it's the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples. And it's now, of course, also home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit and Métis people as well. And something else that I like to do, considering this like beautiful technology and digital platform that allows us all to be together, is to also acknowledge that that all of the internet allows us to gather, but also there's a complexity embedded in that, right? That it's these virtual platforms. Sorry. Oh, here comes Ted. Also disproportionately affect Indigenous people. And that's an important thing, I think, to acknowledge as well. I'm going to introduce myself and then toss to the rest of the folks in the room as well as Ted joins in. I'm Sue. Pronouns are she, her. As I said, I'm joining from Toronto, and I'm the curator of the SummerWorks Exchange programming this year. Maybe I'll toss to you, Alison.
Hi, everyone. I am Alison. Pronouns are they, she, and I'm the curator of the Public Works stream in the festival this year. Oh, I'm also currently in Portugal. It's sunny, it's a beautiful day. I'm about 2 minutes from the ocean. I'm in a place called Carcavelos, which is about maybe 20 minutes outside of Lisbon, and was winemaking country for a while, and then no longer, and now is a bit of a hot spot for beach activities and surfing. I will toss it over to Jiv.
Hey, thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Jiv Parasram, or Jivesh Parasram. I'm one of the co-curators on the presentation stream, and I am based right now in Vancouver, which is located on the unceded Coast Salish territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. Stolo River actually also runs through. So that's kind of where I'm at. And my pronouns are he, him. I will throw it to Aria.
Hello, humans in this room. Hello, humans beyond. My name is Aria Evans. I use all pronouns, they, she, he, and I am one of the curators for the lab for the SummerWorks Festival, and I am coming to you from Takarando as well. And Ralph, over to you, the other half of the lab.
Hi, my name is Ralph. Magandang umaga, araw, gabi, wherever you are. I'm an artist based on unceded Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, also known as Vancouver. I also guest curator for the lab. Yeah, I need to have a coffee in an hour. I'm gonna send it to Ted.
Hi, I'm Ted, he, him pronouns. I am currently actually zooming in from Toronto, I think. I kind of have no idea where my body is right now, but I'm pretty sure it's here. And it's really hot here today. I'm joining late also, so I don't know if there's anyone left to pass it to.
No, I think that's it, actually. And hi, Ted. Good to see you.
Hi.
I think you got the gist. We just we kicked off and acknowledged that you'd be joining us as soon as the crazy alarm in your building was taken care of. So welcome.
I think it's the humidity. I'm going to blame the humidity.
It is really bad. Just for context, for those listening to this a month from now, it is July 6th as we record this today. And I looked at the calendar, and it's exactly 4 weeks from opening of this year's SummerWorks, which is maybe meant to be. So folks, I just wanted to take time today to circle together with as a group again, now that we've programmed the festival and this thing is coming up. And this conversation will kind of air during the festival as part of the SummerWorks exchange programming. And I thought it felt like a really good opportunity for us to speak about how this festival came together in particular, and maybe we can just kind of tell that story off the top, and how we work together as a group, because there were some, I know, questions about what this curatorial model was going to look like and how it would manifest for the festival this year. So it felt like a nice piece of transparency as well, to give folks an opportunity to hear us all talk as a group. And then if we want to touch on not particularly programming for this year, but just our own individual practices, how we approach curation, different models that we've been a part of, I thought that might be an interesting conversation point too. And as I said, I don't want this to feel like I'm moderating the conversation so much as we're all just having a coffee together and chatting about stuff. So maybe I'll just invite the room to start by telling the story of how we all came together, what the timeline looked like, and how we worked collaboratively. Does anyone want to start?
Oh no, please, Ralph. I would actively not like to, but I will.
I can talk about how I got to the room with you all. Actually, I think it was 2 years ago. I've already been in dialogue with Laura before the whole transition, and I think there was a lot of deep interest, at least for me, to explore curation and how to curate work in this kind of context. My background comes from more organizing ballroom events and structures and curation through that context, and I've been really trying to analyze how the parallels and or the discrepancies within street dance and ballroom and also traditional formats of culture. So this was kind of a way in. So I got a chance to go to the SummerWorks last year. I'll just check it out and hang out, and then this year was more of let's try something. So it's been really exciting to you all. I feel the rest of you have a lot more experience, and I feel I'm really the newbie in the room, it feels like. So I always feel like I learned so much from being in rooms like this where there is more experience, there is more knowledge, and it's been really exciting to see how all the programs have shifted and transformed and or have stayed its course and or all the other variations of that throughout all of this. And I think a lot of the collaborative process, at least for me, because I'm not based in Toronto, will happen the week of the festival. So I'm really excited to hang out with Aria, with Jiv and Alison and Ted and Sue and all of you. And I think that's where a lot of the kinesthetic exchange will happen. So.
Yeah, I guess I can maybe just add from my perspective, just got in touch with Laura, or rather, I guess Laura got in touch with me quite kindly, that let me know that she was leaving and that there was going to be a transition plan, and this was part of it. And I thought it was a neat idea of a way to kind of address the transition that the organization was going to go through, because they had to do a search. And so, being able to bring people on who are colleagues and peers and that kind of thing, I thought was an interesting way to come at it. And for me, I don't know specifically, because I don't live in Toronto anymore as my main place, and try to be there when I can. I would have felt a little bit odd kind of if it was hey, can you interim just do this? That would not be a thing. I would either have the capacity, or I think really I'm not plugged in enough to kind of be able to do that in a real way. But what was exciting actually was oh, it's going to be a team of people. And so the prospect of being able to work with a group of folks to kind of look at what is possible within the means that the festival has for the next year, I thought was quite an exciting way to approach it. And I also I have a lot of deep affection for this festival and for the city. So I think that was a strong thing for me to want to try to be involved in any way I could.
Yeah, I recall Laura reaching out. We were on a walk somewhere in Toronto, and I think it was one of the first nice days of the year last year. Um, and and the conversation around curating came up, and again, really same with you, Jiv, like really excited about the idea of being in a team and getting a sense of like feedback, like, oh, like this idea of hearing what everybody is thinking about in this moment, and then relating that immediately to things that I'm thinking about, and then, okay, how can that lead me towards a direction with curation was really interesting. And and then I remember, it's funny because we're on Zoom now, I'm having like a flashback of us all being on Zoom November. I think that was maybe the first time we all came together. So there was quite a few months, I think, in between where we were probably all starting to think about what the curation could look like. And then we came together and started having conversations. So that was a really fun moment for me.
Well, Sue, you asked us to tell a story. So it was 2015. I was a young little baby. SummerWorks was actually the first festival who presented my choreographic work. It was the very first time that somebody had extended an invitation to put something in a public domain beyond the very, very, very informal things that I'd done in the past from graduating university. And I continued to be involved with the festival. I created interdisciplinary work a few years after that. I had been doing some archival documentation work a few years after that. And the time that Laura had been the artistic director of the festival, we'd had many conversations about curation, about curatorial visioning, about like what the festival represents in the city and beyond, what are the like really important, beautiful things that SummerWorks specifically has to offer a community in the audience. And when it came to bringing a group of people together, the idea of curating for the lab alongside some other folks just felt like it fit in really naturally. I think Laura is somebody who's really great at bringing people together who see things from many different perspectives, but collectively have like a cohesion. And I really respect and appreciate the voices of all of the people who are curating this year, and really see those sort of like threads of where we support different communities in the work that we're bringing together for this festival.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about going last in this round is that I'm just going to echo things that everybody else has said. Similarly to Alison, Laura and I have. It was on some walk. We go on a lot. Laura's practice is walking as well. Like so much of her artistic and curatorial practice is about walking. So we were on a walk, and it was one of many because I've kind of been in dialogue with Laura throughout her tenure as AD, starting from in her transition year in. I was directing a show in SummerWorks and said, "Hey, do you want to chat afterwards? I just have some like thoughts about being an artist in this festival, and I'm curious where you're trying to take it." And that evolved into like partnerships and collaborations that took a lot of different forms over the years. In my role at Stratford, I was quite involved in supporting the lab, basically 2019, 2021. So all through the pandemic years, and 22 to an extent. The pandemic years and right before. So trying to see and understand how the festival was constantly iterating a new model every single year. And a lot of that was done because it felt urgent. But in a way, when Laura decided to transition out of the role and pitched this idea of the curatorial team, it seemed kind of like a natural, oh yeah, one more like radical reimagining of what SummerWorks can be. And that felt really exciting, especially as everyone's pointed out this thought of coming in as part of a team and entering into dialogue. I think we'll get to this curious collaborations theme in the conversation, but I think that there is something that characterized a lot of how Laura put the festival together for many years, which was like a kind of curiosity about what happens when you initiate a process between really cool people. And you don't know how it's going to go, but I trusted she had good taste in people. I didn't even know everyone, like who was going to be in the room eventually, but I knew that the circles that had been surrounding SummerWorks for these last 6 years were really strong and rigorous and brought a lot of care and curiosity to the festival. So I was very game to be part of. Who knows what this is gonna be? That felt exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. I really enjoy listening to what it listening to each of you reminds me of, with the exception of you, Ralph, and you mentioned like you feel like you're younger to this process than the rest of us. But I also think that that's a very strategic lens to have as part of the curatorial model. And thinking of quite deep histories that most of us have with SummerWorks in different capacities. For me, when and Ted, you mentioned the lab, and I worked with you like on the SummerWorks side of the lab when you were doing the Stratford lab. That collaboration, there's something very smart about bringing people in who have had different lenses on the festival in previous iterations, now becoming part of a curatorial collective like this. And I was really excited that Laura also invited me in. I was not on a walk, oddly, with her when that happened, although there have been walks. And I think my role in SummerWorks has been, I was a playwright like very long time ago, and my first play was produced at the festival. And then I was working on the Progress Festival, which is another curatorial collaboration that was a model that SummerWorks and the Theater Center jointly were presenting. It was quite a satisfying experience. But then coming in during the pandemic, I joined the SummerWorks producing team, and I was working on the lab and working on the exchange. And I think I touched on this in my in the curatorial statement that we all contributed one, and is available on the SummerWorks website. But there was always something really satisfying about working with SummerWorks in terms of, the resources are not grandiose, but the resources were always allocated in a way that, as a producer, I love the fact that I could always ask artists working in lab or exchange contexts, what is it that you need? Sometimes it's finances, sometimes it's like me, being introduced to an artist that you would really like to be connected with for the first time. There's a lot of different ways that can manifest. What is it you need? But that SummerWorks always allowed me to ask that question and say, well, let's see what we can do. And so there's a very customized way that almost feels like curation when you're working with individual artists at SummerWorks, that I've always really enjoyed. So being at the curatorial table this year is like really, really a pleasure. And I was really excited. It was in November, I think, Alison. I was really excited when we first came together to just hear what everyone's initial sparks of ideas were and to see how that is all played out. Did anyone want to, I spoke a little bit about different curatorial models. Did anyone want to share perhaps like other models that they've been a part of, or what the challenges and opportunities of us like working as a team are? I think SummerWorks has always been an organization, as you pointed to, Ted, that has played with different reimaginings most years, from a single curatorial voice to different disciplinary lenses coming together to something that's more of what we saw this year. But I'd love to hear other thoughts on curatorial practices that you've been a part of.
I think like I can say, I generally speaking, like it's very rare that I'm in a curatorial situation that's not collaborative in some way. like even just from the very basics of like, say I am the lead, like the only person who's on the curation thing, it's still a collaboration with the artist. Like it's an active collaboration in terms of looking like, okay, what is the thing that they're doing? What can we provide? Are we actually capable? And then talking to people about like this is what we got, and it might not be exactly what you're looking for, but and how do we actually make that part work? But generally speaking, like I will say, most of the stuff, whenever I've got a chance to curate, my go-to is to kind of build an advisory or a team around it. And I think it's probably just because it's good for me to have different perspectives in terms of seeing things in a different way. I definitely have my own prejudices towards like the forums and things that I'm more interested in, which is not always what audiences are necessarily interested in. So it's like being able to bring the adequate vocabulary, like when it comes to like theater performance, like more like political action oriented stuff, like I'm very comfortable there. Try to talk to me about dance and I can't understand it beyond like it's cool, and that's not useful in terms of a curatorial lens. So I know like I need people who have knowledge of other disciplines around me in order to actually be able to appreciate them. So I think that's been a major factor for me in terms of like how I can curate anything, because I do believe that it should be interdisciplinary. We should be moving away from kind of discipline specific silos and that kind of stuff, and I see the work doing that. So how do we actually develop that skill?
One of the things that I find myself quite often thinking about in positions of curatorial imagining is, what is the story that I want to tell with this curation? Like, what is an invitation in for an audience? Are there themes that all of the work in different ways connect to? Is there an overarching idea that I want to put forward for that season or that programming? And how do you collaborate with the artists to find like their tethers to that idea, so that an audience can be invited into maybe something that they're really excited about seeing, and then looking at the other programming going, oh, I can see where they're connected, maybe I'll go see that one as well. And what was interesting about this process is there was a lot of trust in what other people were going to bring to the like very, very packed festival. And I found myself thinking, like, is there a story that I want to tell with the lab that I'm curating? Does it matter if there's an overarching story between other people's works as well? And inside of that, there is, like, when we look at this idea of curious curation or curious pairings of people, I can see how even with all of our different perspectives coming together, that in and of itself is an interesting story for audiences to get excited about, but just taking it from a slightly different lens. And I'll echo, Jiv, what you offered of like having other perspectives, having an advisory committee, having somebody to just like look over applications with you is always like, I love that. I love getting to be a dialogue. I love to argue about like why we really believe in something, and finding the sort of balance of all of the things that you have to consider as a curator. It's not just the work, it's not just the artist. Like there's so many things to be thinking about inside of that visioning.
I feel that for me, my curatorial process, as being one of maybe my first ones, has been a lot about translation. I've been thinking about the word translation, and especially with the work that I'm doing, working with artists that don't come from a culture or a space of creating work in a theater in a specific context like that. So there's been a lot of like, I'm learning, there's a lot of learning to be able to share with these artists how to translate what we do on the runway at a ball and bring it into a context where it doesn't get muddied or predisposed to like the structures of that building, of that space. So I'm hoping that the process with them becomes one of finding a new way of interpreting their practice. And a lot of them come from maybe more of like a dance context, but I've been nudging and offering other ways of showing the physicalities through mediums, through sound, through light, and it's been a really interesting journey, just like, yeah, translating. And I think with this term of translation comes also like from a linguistic sense, like you have to understand the cultural context of the language in order to translate it. You can't just verbatim Google Translate word for word, because the context is important. So I think that's been something I'll be carrying after this for sure.
Yeah, I think again, echoing a lot of things, like this idea of curation as always an act of collaboration. Like, I think one of the things that I'm thinking about as I listen to everyone talk is that sometimes, and I've been guilty of this, like as an artist in the community, sometimes it feels like curation happens for the benefit of the institution or for like institutional affirmation. It's assembling like, we're going to put this roster together for us. But really, I think in the conversations we've had, there's been a lot of chat about like curation as an act of service or an act of connecting between artists and audiences, and that collaboration that you were pointing towards, Jiv, like even when you are the sole curator, this like, what do the artists need and how do we connect the audiences to their work? How do we give some kind of tools or context to understand it, and can we do that, and can we do that with the limited resources? There's also we've all had to carry the reality of SummerWorks financial heft versus also like what it sometimes lacks in financial heft, it has in partnerships, it has in goodwill, love, trust. Like there is an ability for the festival, based on the strength of the relationships that it's built, to reach further than an organization of its size might. I'm thinking also a lot about, I love, Aria, that you brought up trust, because I think that it doesn't always feel like collaboration in curation happens from a place of trust and possibility. And that has felt like, I think the brief was extremely loose for all of us in curating this, and that there was a trust that we understood what SummerWorks is here to do in the world and to do in this city, but as part of a system that reaches across many territories. And this active translation, I mean, it's interesting, like kind of on two fronts. I think a lot of us have reached towards the idea of bringing in work from outside of town, more so than any festival I can remember. I don't quote me on that because I'm not looking at the like past lineups, but it feels like people are coming from a lot of different territories to perform as part of this festival, and from a lot of different practices, like kind of like ballroom on the edge of performance. I know like several of the pieces in the presentation series are sort of at the edge of, is it theater, is it performance, what is what is the nature of this kind of performance? I know with the piece, Jiv, that you've curated, and it's true with the piece that I'm bringing forward, and certainly the public works, and I just think across here there's a really interesting reach across territories, and like not even like I want to say across disciplines, but that feels wrong because it's like kind of at the blurred edges of disciplines. It's not fully crossing from one to the other, but we're sitting in those kind of gray spaces between forms, and that feels, I mean, that feels like kind of what SummerWorks is here to do. So that's felt exciting to see come together in such an organic, trusting, collaborative way.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the understanding that each of us have of the festival, whether it's through our own experience or through our experience in the festival or our experience of the festival. And that idea of trust really resonates for me, in this space, but also knowing that there is a community that comes to SummerWorks every year to experience a very particular kind of offering, or a particular space that offerings are made. And that was on my mind a lot, thinking about public works and how are the experiences that programming offers connected and related to each of the other offerings as well, and the spaces that they're going to be in, right? I think this year is really interesting because we're able to kind of spread from the east end of the city to the west end of the city, even though technically it's a more scaled down festival. So there's something really enriching about this kind of collaboration, because it is giving a depth to the thinking with so many voices and considerations in the mix.
Ralph, I really appreciate you bringing up the ideas around translation. I'd love to just dig into that a little bit more in terms of translating from different contexts and like learning about something like ballroom suddenly being placed in a more traditional quote unquote theater space. What does that do to the work? I guess I'm thinking about the idea of curation being rooted in care, and how different curators define care differently. What does care actually mean? Is it care for the artists? It can be and or all these things. Care for the artists, care for the output, the artistic object at the end of the day. Care, Alison, you just made me think about care for communities or neighborhoods, or like where we place the work, how we encounter audiences who both choose to purchase a ticket and willingly see a show, but when we're thinking about the public works stream, neighborhoods just encounter a work that we place there. So, and I know that SummerWorks has always done a lot of thinking about that. How do we enter into a neighborhood where, something like Switching Queens, which, goes into a neighborhood context and thinks very deeply about building relationships over time with communities. And so I'd love to hear other thoughts on that and how each of you think about care within your own practice.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, when I was building this programming, I was thinking of the ballroom context, like nationally, like the three main ballroom scenes, which is in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. And also that SummerWorks is in Toronto. If I'm doing anything ballroom related, it just made sense to connect with the ballroom community that's already there, that I'm also familiar with. So from the beginning, there's always been this interaction and thought of like, okay, how are we connecting with the ballroom scene? Because it would be very fierce to like not be including any of them at any point, and that's just part of my practice. I think comes from coming from street dance, that like the performance is the community, is the work. I don't know. It's all integrated, and they're all part and parcel of like the entirety of the performance or the work. So, I really pushed in connecting with Toronto, the TKBA, Toronto Kiki Ballroom Alliance, and then with like Twisted and Dana, and then there was a shift to work now with where we've landed with Carrie, which is like this kind of open to all every second Thursday of the month. Kind of a function that happens in the scene that's been kind of growing and new. So we're excited to be able to support something related to the ballroom scene. But from what Michael has also told me, his interest in the future is building a relationship with the ballroom scene in a general sense, a larger sense. So I'm excited that this, at least my offering for the programming this year, doesn't just end after the end of August, but it hopefully will proliferate into like more interaction and even conversations about doing a mini ball. And then there's dialogues about what is a ball as a festival again. So it kind of circles back around. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where it goes. And I hopefully, at least how I've been working with SummerWorks, that the care and the trust that is being built between me is also shared with the ballroom community as they build their relationship.
I think like it's this is kind of a new thought that just popped up as we were talking about it through the context of translation, but I think like care and curation, like I often hear it kind of put together from the kind of like root word, which is, I believe, like, because curator, it was heart. And it's, I guess it's interesting to think of it like that is automatically kind of, not automatically, but it's been embraced as like, it's care, it's caring, versus maybe thinking of it more as like curation is a heart action in some ways. And I don't actually necessarily mean just emotionally, but like that it is a pump, it is an engine, and it's something that is needed in a kind of larger body to get stuff to move around, to get stuff, in, out, cleanse, whatever it is. And so at least now in this kind of like tangential kind of thinking of it, it does get me thinking about like what a festival is too, like, and what type of care, even from a medical kind of thing that is. I've always kind of looked at, especially when I was at Pasmarai, I remember talking quite a bit with them about this, about like, what is the difference between the impact that a production has throughout the season versus a festival. And I think it's very much like, one is kind of like a cultural treatment, like you might go to like acupuncture, you go regularly until you don't need to. So actually, maybe not the best, but reflective perhaps of the arts. Whereas the festival itself is like this bombardment, like massive treatment that's happening. It's like I don't want to say chemo because that's very, very painful, but sometimes it is. And I will say SummerWorks, a lot of the work that I've specifically done has been quite painful for people. But I think that's important, right? To be immersed in this kind of like thing. It's like being able to it's the macro dose for the micro doses we need to get through the day. Or maybe that's just me, I'm not sure. Throw that to you guys.
I will jump off of that. I will jump away from the chemo side of it, but like I really connect to like that idea of a macrodose. And it's Jim. um, I love festivals. Like I really, and it's funny because I don't actually like large crowds of people. I do not thrive in those situations. But I love the kind of adrenal rush of a festival. Because it's short term. Most of the works only have like a couple performances. Like North by Northeast here, when that happened, like years ago, it used to have a larger presence in the city, and I would spend 4 days just on my bike rolling with a crew of people, like 9 o'clock here, 10 o'clock here, 11 o'clock here, really trying to catch as much as you do. And I love that kind of, well, I also am a person who likes Tech Week because I kind of get off on living off nothing but Red Bull and protein bars and like a bit of panic. That's a comfortable place for me to be in. So like festival environments also work for me in that way. Um, but I like that, like there's an act of care, I think, and this idea of care comes in like there's an invitation to folks to step outside of the ordinary for the duration of a festival. Like it's not like your routine. I'm going to go to the theater on Thursday night because there's always stuff on from like September to May. But it's really like, how am I going to schedule it? How can I make the most of this time? and how can we as curators kind of support the sense making and the connecting that's going to happen between those? How are the presentations supported by like public works and by exchange and by lab? Like how do all of these works that we're putting together exist in a kind of loose dialogue with each other? And how can they produce kind of extraordinary frictions between them, or connection points, or charges between them, in ways that are both intentional and serendipitous? I think that, and then also, I recognize that living off of Red Bull and protein bars is not a healthy thing to do to the human body. So also trying to think about, and I think that this has been a really interesting transformation for SummerWorks over the last 6 years, is trying to think about, like I used to joke, and this is part of what my conversation with Laura was about, like, sure, you can do like 1,200 video cues in a SummerWorks tech. It will take 6 months off the end of your life, but you can do that. And like trying to think a little bit about how a festival on this scale can support artists to have extraordinary ambition, to desire to produce the extraordinary macrodose kind of experiences, but also how can we support them to do that better, and how do we do that through a lens? I think a real change in the ethos that I've noticed in the time that's passed since I was an artist in the festival is that it's moved towards a much more one size fits one model on the producing end, on the presentation end, on how audiences encounter stuff. There's a lot more care that has been put into like creating individual contexts for every show, and it's felt exciting to be part of the conversations that we've been having this year that also have been about creating those individualized containers for each of these works, which still are supposed to speak to each other.
I'm really vibing on the idea of intensity that happens in a festival environment, and how that intensity can become a catalyst for discovery and exploration. And Sue, you mentioned Switching Queens, and they have a history with SummerWorks, where they've been able to work in this context that we talked about, that makes SummerWorks such an exciting place to be creating work from and connecting to audiences from. And I was really interested in thinking about artists that are new to SummerWorks that could benefit from that kind of a forum, from that kind of opportunity to look at how their practice is evolving and what their new curiosities are, and what then what then opens up for them once they're kind of plugged into that. And yeah, that intensity can be hard when you're an independent artist or an independent collective trying to make something, to have that kind of almost like a growth spurt, that working in this festival environment can give you, is I think a part of the care that can be afforded.
I feel like I don't have very many original thoughts to add to all of the beautiful offers that have been made around care, but I think I'm thinking about care in relationship to experience. Like, what is the experience of the artists? What is the experience of the audience? What is the experience of the staff? And where does care fit into that umbrella? And I really think, for me as a curator, I think about building relationships, and I think about being available. and continuing to check in with people. What do you need? Like, what is your biggest dream? Like, if you don't ask, the answer is going to be no. So let's see where we can like find that capacity, find that macro dose where we can like dream together, and underneath that ensure that folks are having a good experience, that, you know, the artists feel supported, they feel like they have the resources that they need, or they understand the resources that are going to be given to them, that audiences similarly have an access point to the work where they can engage with it, where they're being given tools to understand it if it's a leap for them from something that they haven't experienced before. And yeah, I think the nature of being in dialogue with one another and like continuing to just be like, hey, you got what you need, you good, like what more can we do? And then in that reciprocity also articulating where there might be parameters and where like there might be something that needs to shift. And I always find that in asking for like the most absurd dream level actually births something that you might have not even known was possible. And for me, that's sort of where the magic of festival work lays.
Thank you for that, everyone. It's I think we've established we're all super fans of festivals as an aside to all this, which is I couldn't agree more. There's something listening to you talk about it, Ted. I almost feel like when you're at a festival, you can, as a audience member, you can be anyone you want to be. Like I almost feel like you embody a different kind of spirit when you're biking at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock over here and over there, and it's just this. Oh. Gosh, that was a lot of water that just fell. It's okay. And you know, you're just bombarded by good experiences, by bad, by challenging, by wonderful, like all at once. And you take what you want from that experience for sure. That's fine. We'll worry about that later. I'm mindful of time, which we really don't have. We just have a couple minutes left. So I actually feel we got to a great place with ending on thoughts around care and festivals and our shared enthusiasm for that. Does anyone have any final thoughts or offers that they did want to make before we close today? Something else to say?
I guess I'm just listening to everybody else speak. I'm also thinking about a kind of conversation that is like between care and permission, or between care and like its relationship to control, because I think we're all really there's a fine line in terms of like creating the environment where audiences can choose their own adventure, can make their own sense out of the connection between things. There's a desire to contextualize, there's a desire to give more tools to make the experience richer. Like I also share that desire to like examine what happens in the act of translation of one form into a space that might not conventionally hold it, or artists from one context into another. But then I guess that permission comes back to maybe another act of trust or embodiment of trust, to say like, go make your own meaning out of this, have an amazing time, stay up really late, you know, meet some strange people at like whatever event that you're at. And I think it's just, you know, in creating the structure of any kind of festival, finding that balance between, like, as you say, Aria, we're here if you need us. We're available, but we're not going to like be super prescriptive about how you engage with what the offers are, or what it means to you, or how you connect to it, and how you connect it to the other things that you've seen. So yeah, I think care, permission, control, those ideas are all kind of swirling around each other for me.
I think like what it kind of gets me to think about is the difference between like being a producer versus being a presenter, that kind of thing, and how much I can actually be involved and how much I should be involved. Like thinking about it as permission is really interesting because in some ways, I guess the permission is granted by just saying like, okay, go do whatever you want. What I'm doing is I'm just putting trust in you. And I try to do that as a producer, but I have a different responsibility then. Versus when we're presenting stuff, it's really like, listen, we saw what you're doing. We'll give you the platform. We'll make sure the platform's here. We'll make sure people know how to get in the door. And we'll do our best to make sure that they can understand where you're coming from. But I'm not going to tell you how to do what you do at all. I'm not going to try to make you change what you do at all. And I think that, on the one hand, like if I were doing that as a producer, that would kind of be lazy producing, like I should be talking and weighing in and trying to think about how it works. But this is a different relationship. And it's a relationship where, I think trust is the big part of it. And it's the trust to know, like, for the artist to be able to walk in and just say, like, I know that I have my back covered. I'm going to do my thing and we'll see how it goes. So I think that there's a certain level of, so I guess I go back to permission. Is it permission? I'm not sure if it's permission as much as it's like, just opening up the door to, actually, you know what? As I say that, a door is a type of permission. Sure, it's permission. It's permission to do whatever you want. But within a certain frame, within a container. And I think like putting limitations, or at least putting the right framing around it, is really key, because an open door to do whatever you want is a very intimidating thing, especially if you're coming into a new community that you don't have the context for. So that's actually not setting people up to win at all. So I think being able to figure out how those frameworks kind of come together is a really key part.
I want to thank you all for your generosity and your time and your good energy today. I think it's a great conversation. It was nice to speak more broadly than just what are we doing for this particular festival as well, and just talk more about ideas. So I think I speak for all of us when we wish everyone a wonderful festival 4 weeks, when we open 4 weeks from today. And I just thank you all for your time. Take care.
Thanks for bringing us together, Sue.